Let me spend just a couple of minutes, very briefly, on a couple of more items that I know, based on previous meetings that we've done, that are going to pertain to the base and uses of bases. The new Farm Bill pretty much keeps the loan program operating as it is. These are the loan rates under the old program and then under the new program. All of them pretty much the same with the exception of cotton. Cotton's going to be allowed to float. One of the things about the loan, and I know back last fall when we had the sequestration and we had a cut in the loan amounts due to that, I get calls from the paper sometimes, particularly Atlanta paper, Wall Street Journal, other places, and they're all talking about, you know, how's this going to affect farmers or whatever, and they think that the marketing loan is actually a subsidy, it's a payment. And I said, no, not really, it isn't. Basically, it's a marketing tool, and again, use that as an opportunity to explain to them how this thing actually works. But those of you that have ever used the loan or are familiar with it, basically you can store the crop. In the case of cotton, up to 9 months, you pledge the crop as collateral to the Commodity Credit Corporation, to the government, and they give you a loan, and then you've got 9 months, say in the case of cotton, to repay that loan. So it's really not a handout. It's a marketing tool. Well, these are the rates that we've got in place under the new Farm Bill, and like I said, they're all the same we've had before with the exception of cotton. This is kind of a busy slide, but it basically goes through some of the mechanism with regard to cotton. The loan rate on cotton is going to be tied to the AWP, that's the adjusted world price. If you're a cotton grower in here, how many of you remember when we had POP payments? POP payments, LDP, something like that. The reason you got that POP payment, it was tied to the adjusted world price. When the adjusted world price got down below the loan rate, they just give you a POP payment and say you just keep your cotton out of loan. It all has to do with the repayment rule, and we're not going to get into all that. But basically what you've got here for cotton is that the loan rate's going to be tied to the adjusted world price for the previous 2 crop years. But actually, when you look at it, and I try to go through it on this slide, because of the date, the loan rate, for example, the loan rate for the upcoming 2014 crop would have been announced, normally would have been announced by October 1. That's the rule. It has to be announced by October 1 prior to planting the next crop. Well, when you think about that, if the new rule says that the loan rate on cotton is going to be the average adjusted world price for the previous 2 crop years, actually there's going to be a year lag in there, because right now we're not even through with the 2013 crop year. That won't be through until the end of July this summer. So there's going to be a 1-year lag in there. So in the case of cotton, the loan rate for 2014 is going to be the average of what the AWP was for the 2011 crop and for the 2012 crop. There'll be a 1-year lag in there. And if you go through the formula, look at the prices, we're at the max of 52 cents. So that's what the loan rate will be for this year. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about STAX and about SCO, Supplemental Coverage Option. And I want to talk to you just a minute about what's called transition assistance for cotton. I'm not going to go through all these slides, try to get us back on time. This is basically the transition assistance program for cotton. As Nathan just told you, cotton is not eligible. Everything you just saw on here with regard to PLC and ARC, if you're a cotton grower, none of that applies to you. None of that applies to cotton. Cotton is not eligible for PLC. It's not eligible for ARC. What cotton's going to have is something called STAX. Well, STAX is a new insurance program, and we don't have everything in place yet. So STAX is not going to become eligible for cotton until next crop year, the 2015 crop. So we don't have PLC or ARC, and we're not ready for STAX yet. So because of that, cotton is going to, for 2014, cotton is going to get something called transition assistance. That'll be a payment of 9 cents a pound times the direct payment yield for cotton on your farm. If you're a cotton grower, if you've got cotton base and you don't know what your direct payment yield is, just call up or go by your FSA office and ask them. Have them pull your records out. They can tell you farm by farm what your bases are and what your payment yields are. So this transition assistance on cotton is going to be 9 cents times your direct payment yield times 85% of your base acres. Excuse me, 60%. I'm thinking about something else. 60% of your base acres. This payment, you'll get it on October 1st of this year. Not before October 1st of this year, not 2015, but this year. The important thing is that this money, this payment is not affected by any decision that you made. Nathan just talked about decisions that you've got to make with regard to updating your bases or not, or what you do on those generic base acres, all that stuff. The cotton transition payment is in no way affected by any of those decisions. Okay? If you're a cotton grower and you've got cotton base on a farm, whatever the cotton base was on that farm as of last September 30th, you'll get the 9 cents a pound times your direct payment yield for cotton on 60% of those acres. So whatever decision that you ultimately make about your generic acres or updating your bases or not does not affect this in any way. So those are all independent. You do what you want to with regard to those other decisions. It does not impact this particular payment or calculation at all. The Farm Bill language states that if STAX is not available for the 2016 crop, that this payment will even be received for 2015 in 2015, but only on 36.5% of your crop. So the idea is to have STAX online for the 2015 crop year. But if it isn't, then there's provisions that say this will continue, but at a lower rate, not on 60% of your base, but on 36.5% of your base. But all indications are, and the objective is to have STAX in place for the 2015 crop year. But provisions are in the bill just in case it isn't. And there may be some locations, some counties, where having trouble getting the data or getting it set up that it would apply there. All right. Let me talk to you about STAX very quickly. STAX and then SCO. STAX and Supplemental Coverage Option are going to be 2 new insurance products. You'll get those through your crop insurance provider, just like the crop insurance that you may have on your farm now. A lot of rumors, a lot of misinformation floating around saying, well, STAX and SCO is they're supposed to replace the crop insurance that we've always had. That is not the case. That's not the case at all. It's not designed to be that way. That's not the way it's going to work. Now, STAX is going to cover cotton only. You can, if you're a cotton grower, you can choose to have STAX as your standalone policy on that farm for cotton. You can choose to do that. But STAX is not designed to replace an underlying policy, nor would that be an effective thing to probably do. Let me use this graphic to try to explain to you as simple as I can what STAX is going to do. And the good thing about it is we've got a year to understand all this, okay? Because it's not going to come into effect. You're not going to have to make a decision about this until next year. Most of you probably have an underlying insurance policy for crops on your farm. It's either a yield policy or a revenue policy. You could have CAT, but you've got a policy, a crop insurance policy in place already on the farm. STAX is designed to come in over the top of that, to complement that, to supplement that. And what this graphic is trying to explain, Nathan, I don't know if I'm mashing the wrong buttons or it's just not working, but the little laser thing. But in this example, that blue area down there, the farm's got either a yield or revenue policy at 60, let's say 65% coverage. That's fairly typical. STAX is going to come in over the top of that and offer you coverage from 70% up to 90%, that green area there. Now, the important point is STAX is going to be based on county revenue, on what happens in the county for cotton. This is very critical. This is very important for y'all to understand. STAX is going to pay out based on what happens at the county level. What happens on your farm, whether your individual policy down there in blue triggers in, is entirely separate from that. You could have a loss on your farm, but there not be a loss at the county, at the STAX level, and you may or may not get paid. If there's no loss at the STAX level, then you're not going to get any money from the STAX policy. So there's all sorts of combinations that can happen here. You could have a loss on your farm and get paid from your individual policy, but there not be a loss based on county yield and prices and nothing on STAX kick in. Or you could have a great year on your farm and your policy not pay you anything, but yet county-wide yields have been hurt enough to trigger in a STAX payment. So you wouldn't get any payment perhaps from your individual farm policy, but you would get a payment because of the level of revenue reached at the county level. You'd get a payment through STAX. So again, the important point is you're going to more than likely continue to have your individual policies that you've always had on your farm at whatever level you elect. And then if you choose to purchase STAX, it's just an additional insurance policy that'll come on top of what you've already got and pay based on county losses. Okay? That's the best way that I know to try to explain it to you. You don't have to have an underlying policy. You can purchase STAX alone. But just realize that if you don't have an underlying policy, then if you have a loss on your farm, but there's no loss at the county level, you won't get anything. So be aware of all the combinations. STAX is based on what's happened at the county level. Obviously, your individual policy yield or revenue is based on what happens on your farm. So you can see where all these little different combinations can come into play. And again, for that reason, you would probably want to keep the underlying insurance policy that you have, that you've traditionally had on your farm for yield or revenue on a crop-by-crop basis. And again, STAX is just for cotton, just for cotton. Pardon me? The gap there shows you, that's a great question, John. Is the blue bar, the individual policy, the individual policy comes up to 65% coverage. STAX only covers from 90% down to 70%. So STAX covers a maximum of 20% loss, from 90% down to 70%. And in this case, the underlying policy on the farm is 65. So there's a little area in there where you're not covered at all. Okay? If you have losses in that white area there, that means, and again, if STAX kicks in, STAX is going to already be at the maximum level at 70%, but you won't get anything from your individual policy because you're not low enough. It hadn't kicked in yet. That little gap there is just a result of the example that I chose to put up there. The other thing is called the Supplemental Coverage Option. If you elect to go ARC County, you are not eligible for SCO and vice versa. If you select SCO, Supplemental Coverage Option, you're not eligible for ARC County. If you go back and look at what Nathan presented and really think about it, those two programs are about the same sort of thing. Very, very similar. With SCO, and again, I'm using an example here with the underlying policy at 65%. Supplemental Coverage Option will kick in at 86%. So losses of greater than 14%. SCO will kick in at 86% and provide coverage for you for losses down to the level of your underlying policy. So unlike STAX, where you didn't have to have an underlying policy, you can purchase STAX by itself if that's what you want to do for cotton. But under SCO, you are required to have an underlying policy. We're not sure, the Farm Bill language is not clear whether it's going to cover all the way down for a cat or not. But you're required to have an underlying policy, and if you purchase Supplemental Coverage Option, SCO, it'll come in and provide you coverage from 86% down to whatever level you have on your individual policy. Again, it's just like STAX. You're going to have that policy on your farm, yield or revenue, like you've always had for your crops. SCO is going to come in and just stack right on top of it. It's going to cover what we call shallow losses. So in this example, if you've got a 65% policy on corn and you purchase SCO, SCO will cover from 86% down to that 65% level. So but again, this is based on what happens, just like STAX, this is based on what happens at the county level. So SCO will kick in only if county revenue is less than the benchmark, or less than the benchmark guarantee. So it comes in and provides you coverage on top. So you could not have a loss on your farm because you wouldn't be down in that dark orange area there, but the county could have a loss, and you still get a payment kick in that would be paid to you. So again, it's just additional coverage that comes on top of the policy that you'd already have.